Hi everyone, I'm the Limitless Librarian, and today I'm going to be doing another Riordanverse discussion video. This is my third video discussing something from the Percy Jackson universe. Today I'm going to be talking about the Lotus Hotel and Casino, which we see in the very first Percy Jackson book, The Lightning Thief. More specifically, how this thing was addressed after this book, and whether it is still operating, and whether it even could be stopped. So to recap, the Lotus Hotel and Casino is operated by the Lotus Eaters, who are figures from Greek mythology, and specifically in the myth of Odysseus, I believe, and his journey home from the Trojan War. And when you stayed with them, more time passed than what you perceived. You could spend a night sleeping with them and it would turn out to be a number of years had passed by the time you woke up, although you would only perceive a single night. In the Percy Jackson universe, in modern day, the Lotus Eaters operate the Lotus Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, which essentially serves a similar function. Percy Jackson and Annabeth and Grover find the Lotus Hotel when they're on their quest in the first book to go to the underworld. They're on a deadline, but they still have 7 days to go. So they go there to find a place to stay the night. However, the Lotus Casino sucks them in with games and magic powers, and it's only through Percy Jackson being reminded that he has to save his mum that the spell is broken, and he manages to wrest the other two away from the place. Only when they come out, they discover that although it only felt like they were there for a few hours, in reality a number of days had passed and they only have 1 day left until the deadline. While they're there, Percy Jackson encounters some hippie guy who seems to think that it's still the 1970s, which strikes Percy as strange. So, although Percy Jackson and co were only there for a few days, there are obviously people there that have been there for literally decades. They've just been sucked in and brainwashed, and they have no idea that the world has moved on without them. And the casino's magic, or the Lotus Eaters' powers, or whatever, prevent these people from aging, as we see later in the series. Given that Percy and co are on a time crunch, and they just lost most of the time that they thought they'd have to do the quest, they don't stick around to try and deal with this problem or think any more deeply about the whole situation. They just go and get on with things. And the Lotus Casino isn't addressed again until the start of the third book, The Titan's Curse, where we meet two demigods, Nico and Bianca D'Angelo. We later learn that they were in fact born in like the 1930s, but were placed in the casino for the last 70 years until they were taken out in time to potentially be subjects for the Great Prophecy. Their father Hades placed them in the Lotus Hotel when the Great Prophecy happened in order to protect them and essentially hold them until potential subjects for the Great Prophecy showed up, so that he could make one of his own children the subject of the Great Prophecy. So from that we know that nobody did anything about the Lotus Casino after Percy's encounter with it. It does make me wonder how many demigods have been sucked into it and were in fact still there. How many demigods just completely went missing with no explanation and were assumed killed in action when in fact they were in the Lotus Casino this entire time. So basically it bothered me after reading this that the camp does not seem to have done anything about the Lotus Casino to try and shut it down. After all, Percy and co could very well have been the first demigods to have gone in there and then escaped again to tell the tale, at least in their own lifetime, so that Chiron or other people at camp could know what happened and what this place is. So why didn't Chiron send a quest to shut this place down, given how many mortals and potentially non-mortals had been sucked in there? After all, when Percy and co went there, the place was packed, and it's not just non-mortals that get sucked in, obviously, as explained by that hippie guy. They found it's regular humans as well. How many missing persons cases were there where the missing person was in fact sucked into the Lotus Hotel? So, why was a quest never sent out to deal with the Lotus Eaters and the Lotus Hotel? Well, for a start, there's actually no mythological precedent explaining how they were defeated, because Odysseus never actually defeated them. Some of his men got taken in after eating the fruit that the Lotus Eaters offered them, which acted as a narcotic and is what caused them to fall asleep and never want to leave and stay there for however long. So Odysseus just dragged them back to the ship and left without doing anything about them. So with no mythological instruction manual on how to deal with the Lotus Eaters, or even how to resist them, it would be kind of risky for Chiron to send kids in blind, because keep in mind, the majority of the camp's population are teenagers. So they would be going in blind with no idea of how to solve this problem. Most of the monsters that Percy Jackson encounters and defeats, he uses similar methods to how their original slayers slayed them in the myths. But there is no mythological precedent for dealing with the Lotus Eaters. For another thing, the Lotus Eaters aren't necessarily malevolent like monsters are. As I said in the myth, it's this fruit they eat that sucks them in and makes them act the way they do, like a drug. So if they're all brainwashed by this fruit, they're not really meaning any harm, even though they are obviously doing harm. So really, the solution would be to destroy the fruit or the source of it. But as far as I remember, we don't actually see that in the books. In the dreaded movie, we do actually see the people at the Lotus Casino give Percy and co these lotus flower cakes, which presumably contain the same stuff that the mythological Lotus Eaters ate. But we're not gonna deal with the movie canon. If I had to guess as to how the Lotus Hotel could suck people in without making them eat anything, maybe the place has like perfume that is made from this lotus stuff that people breathe in, and that's what causes them to be hypnotized. But anyway, my point is there's no precedent on either how to defeat the Lotus Eaters or how to resist the plant that is the root cause of this problem. However, there is another layer to this. Instead of asking, could we shut down the Lotus Hotel, what we really should be asking is, should we? Because as I said, there were heaps of people in there, and some of them had been locked in there for really long periods of time. Nico and Bianca had been in there for like 70 years, during which time the world had massively changed. Luckily, they were still kids, and also they were non-mortals, which means they could be clued into what happened to them and potentially reintegrated into society. But what about all the humans that were trapped in there? Imagine a human who ended up in there at the same time that Nico and Bianca did in the 1930s or 1940s, and having them enter society today. How would they even function? How would they adapt to it? How could they understand what had happened to them or explain it to people without seeming completely crazy? Furthermore, we don't actually know how old this thing is. It might not necessarily have been a hotel and casino for as long as it has operated, but given that it's a modern version of the Lotus Eaters Island, which existed in ancient Greece, it's likely that the Lotus Eaters have had some kind of base of operations that entire time, and it's just taken a different form throughout the ages, much as Mount Olympus and the gods' operations changed through the times. So there's no telling how old some of the people who are in there could be. There could be people there who are hundreds of years old and have just been shuffled between Lotus Eater bases without realizing it because they're stuck in the stupor of the Lotus Eaters' power or fruit or whatever. So if the Lotus Hotel did get shut down for good, what would be done with all those people? I don't think camp could really accommodate them, even if they were clued into the truth, even the humans. The camp could not accommodate them, especially not for the rest of their whole lives. Nor do they have the resources to help them reintegrate into modern society. Never mind the logistics of having to get paperwork and the like for all of them in order to make it seem, for all intents and purposes, to anybody and everybody that they had existed in modern times and were normal people with nothing strange going on. Maybe the gods could do something about this problem, but quite frankly, I don't know that they would care. Especially not about regular mortals who don't even believe in them anymore. So what's to be done? The ideal solution would be to figure out a way to stop the Lotus Hotel from sucking in new victims, or at least acting as a sanctuary for the people for whom it's too late. Because I don't see how those people could be brought out, especially the older ones. Even if the camp sent people there to conduct some kind of census of the place in order to figure out who could be brought out and who had been in there for too long, there's no guarantee that quest party wouldn't get sucked in too. Unless they could send people there to bring back some kind of sample of the lotus fruit in order for perhaps the Hecate cabin to work on developing some kind of means of resisting the drug, there's no way for the Lotus Hotel to be explored safely for a long period of time like that. Hence, any plan to shut it down presents a logistical challenge in and of itself, even before considering what to do with all of the people who had been imprisoned there. Part of why this video took so long to get out, aside from uni being busy, was that I was just determined to try and figure out some kind of action plan for this Lotus Hotel, but honestly, I just can't think of one. I can't even say for sure whether or not it would be ethical to shut it down, given what I said about the people who are trapped inside, and then their impossibility to reintegrate a lot of them into modern society. I definitely think that some kind of measure should be implemented to prevent the Lotus Casino from sucking in more people, but I don't even know what that would be. Besides, if the Lotus Eaters are that determined to continue their operation, that they continue to relocate and reconstruct their bases and adapt to the times, like all the other mythological people we see in Percy Jackson, I don't know, you could really permanently solve this problem unless you actually destroyed the lotus fruit and all sources of it. And we never actually saw that in the books when Percy and co were in the Lotus Hotel. So I don't know that that would be possible. And of course there's no telling how far the lotus fruit may have spread or where more of it might be located. Maybe a Demeter child, especially a particularly powerful one like Meg McCaffrey, could do something to locate the rest of the lotus flowers out there to try and destroy them, but I don't know. Anyway, I'd love to know what you guys think, because I think this Lotus Hotel presents a really interesting challenge for any kind of plot, whether it's a role play or a fan fiction, or even if Rick Riordan himself wants to address this later, to find a way to shut this whole operation down permanently. So let me know in the comments below. Can you think of a way that the Lotus Hotel could be shut down permanently, and do you think it's even ethical to do so given the people inside? Let me know in the comments below. Thus concludes my discussion of the Lotus Hotel and what's to be done about it. This is my third Percy Jackson discussion video. I've done one on the Camp Half-Blood shirts and one about Lavinia Asimov from the Trials of Apollo series. So I'll pop links to those below in the description if you haven't seen them yet, so please do check those out. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. And as always, do lots of maths, read lots of books, and I'm sure you'll have an amazing day.